Hi class, welcome back to Fundamentals of Accounting, Business and Management Part 1. So previously, especially on our topic about the users of accounting information, we have established that accounting is the language of business. So it communicates the financial condition and performance of a business to interested users for decision-making purposes. So a widely accepted set of rules, concept, and principles referred to as the generally accepted accounting principles or the GAAP governs the application of accounting procedures. So the GAAP has been developed by the accounting professionals to guide preparers of financial statements in recording and reporting financial information regarding a business enterprise, hence aiding in the effective execution of the accounting procedure and in communicating the financial condition of the business. So in our discussion in this lesson, you will be able to identify generally accepted accounting principles, describe the usefulness of a conceptual framework, and describe the basic assumptions and principles of accounting, and explain the application of the basic principles of accounting. So here's chapter 4, accounting concepts and principles. So before we start our normal discussion, I have here a problem or a situation wherein Vito Sartori opened his first pet shop or Sartori First Pet Shop. So he opened a bank account for his business and deposited 500,000. The business earned 50,000, but he had doubts with the recorded expenses of 60,000. So he is not sure if he should include the following items as expenses. So here are the following expenses. So first is salary expense of 20,000, rent expense of 10,000, utilities expense at home of 15,000, utilities expense at the store 10,000, insurance expense 5,000, and withdrawals of 10,000. So that's a total of 60,000. So the situation here is hindi sure si Vito kung alin lang dapat yung ma-record niya na expense. So, di ba nabanggit niya na naka-earn siya ng 50, pero meron siyang 50,000. So, pero meron siyang doubts dun sa mga na-record ng expenses. So, the question would be, what do you think should not be included as expenses and why? So, first, for the salary expense, so ito yung sahod nung mga empleyado or even sahod ni Vito as normally in single proprietor na mga business, so siya din yung nag-handle. So, parang acting as manager. So, meron siyang salary. So, since this expense is for the operation of the business, so tama lang na expense siya nung business. So, that's correct. And the next one, rent expense. So, rent expense, ito yung bayad para dun sa nirerentahan ng mismong shop ni Vito. So, since it's another one that is for the operation of the first pet shop, so again, that's an expense of the business. So, next is utilities expense at home. So, it can either be the electricity or the water. So, but since it is at home, meaning hindi siya mismo dun sa shop ni Vito. So, since hindi siya para sa operation ng business, so that shouldn't be part of or first pet shop na expenses. And then, utilities expense at the store. So, ito na yung para sa operation mismo ng business na mga utilities. So, ito yung tamang expense or yung tamang utilities expense mismo ng business. And then insurance expense. So again, that's for the operation of the business. So that's correct. That's 5,000 should be part of the expenses. And then withdrawals. So withdrawals, ito yung mga personal na kinuha ni Vito dun sa shop. Let's say, nangailangan siya bigla ng cash for her personal expenses. So ito yung withdrawals or drawings niya dun sa business niya. So this type of transaction na nangyayari sa business ay hindi dapat expense. So, part siya nung parang kumukuha siya dun sa capital na binigay niya dun sa business. So, that's why this shouldn't be part of the expenses. So, ang tama lang na dapat na nandito is yung salary expense, rent expense, utilities expense at the store, and insurance expense. So, this activity is actually an application of one of the principle in accounting. So this is the business entity principle, which is one of the most important principle in accounting. So now, before we discuss the other principles, we will be discussing first what is the conceptual framework of accounting. Conceptual framework of accounting. So, ano nga ba yung conceptual framework of accounting? So, this sets out the agreed concepts that underlie the preparation and presentation of financial statements for external users. So, it is important because it can lead to consistent accounting standards and it prescribes the nature, function, and limits of financial accounting and financial statements. So, hindi naman kasi mapagkakaila na madaming businesses ang pwedeng itayo ng iba't ibang klaseng tao or iba't ibang forms or iba't ibang types. So, paano magkakaroon ng standard or certain guidelines tong mga businesses na to? So, that's why nagkaroon tayo ng conceptual framework of accounting. So, ang importance niya is for the consistency of the accounting standards kung saan na lilimitahan or nape-prescribe yung nature and function ng financial accounting and yung mismong financial statements ng iba't ibang businesses. So, what are the goals of the conceptual framework? First is to assist the FRSC in developing Philippine financial reporting standards and its review of existing PFRS. So, ito yung mga standards. So, they assist the FRSC or yung mga nagagawa or nagde-develop ng mga standards natin dito. And the next is assist FRSC in promoting harmonization of regulations, accounting standards, and procedures relating to the presentation of financial statements by providing a basis for reducing the number of alternative accounting treatments permitted by PFRS. So again, going back, since maraming ang pwedeng maging interpretation or alternative na maging treatment in relation with the set standard. So, ina-assist nung conceptual framework yung FRSC para magkaroon ng parang mare-reduce yung alternatives na pwedeng magawa or para mas maging as one yung standards talaga natin. And the next is assist preparers of financial statements in applying PFRS and in dealing with topics that have yet to form the subject of PFRS. And the next is to assist auditors in forming an opinion as to whether financial statements comply with PFRS. And then again, the last one is to assist the users in interpreting financial statements and provide interested with information about PFRS formulation by FRSE. So, it is, ang main goal niya ay itong 5 na to, of course, para talaga makatulong do sa mga external users and as or kung sino yung mismong gumagamit ng mga financial statements para hindi iba't iba yung interpretation or para hindi magulo or hindi mas madaming treatments yung maisip dun sa mga standards na yon. So, kaya parang nagkakaroon niya ng standards. Therefore, ano nga ba yung scope or ano yung magiging scope ng conceptual framework? So, the conceptual framework deals with the objective of the financial reporting, the qualitative characteristics of useful financial information, the definition, recognition, and measurement of the elements which are the assets, liabilities, equities, income, and expenses from which financial statements are constructed, and the concept of capital and capital maintenance. So that's basically all about conceptual framework of accounting. So that leads to kung bakit tayo merong mga accounting principles. So our main topic for today is the basic accounting principles. So here are the basic accounting principles. We have the business entity, going concern, time period, monetary unit, objectivity, cost principle, accrual accounting principle, matching principle, disclosure, conservatism, and materiality. So, first one is the business entity principle. So, going back dun sa example natin kanina na situation wherein Vito is not sure of kung ano yung mga expenses talaga na dapat i-recognize ng business niya. So, we identify there na yung mga para sa operation or yung para sa business, yun lang yung mga dapat i-expense niya. So, yung principle na ina-apply doon is yung business entity principle. So, it states that a business enterprise is separate and distinct from its owner or investor. Ibig sabihin, magkaibang tao or magkaibang distinct personality yung mismong business and yung mismong owner. So, parang kanina, si Vito and yung first pet shop niya, magkaibang entity yon. So, yung mga expenses nung mismong business is for the business only. And then yung mga expenses ni Vito or personal expenses niya ay para sa kanya lang yon. Hindi pwedeng maging expenses nung business niya. So, here are other examples for the business entity principle. So, if the owner has a barber shop, the cash of the barber shop should be reported separately from his personal cash. So, again, dahil magkaiba yung owner and yung mismong barber shop. And then another one, the owner had a business meeting with a prospective client. So the expenses that come with the meeting should be part of the company's expenses since nagkaroon sila ng meeting for a prospective client or that's for the operation of the business. So, if the owner paid for gas for his personal use, so ito naman, para sa personal use niya, it should not be included as part of the company's expenses. So again, here in business entity principle, we assume that the business and its owners are separate and distinct entities. So yung expense or income ng business ay para sa business lang and yung income or expenses nung mismong owner ay para sa kanya lang. Next one is going concern principle. So here we assume that the business is expected to continue indefinitely. So one example of this is when preparing FS or financial statements, you should assume that the entity will continue indefinitely. So that's why yung mga businesses, yung mga fixed assets nila ay dine-depreciate din nila over their useful life. So parang one indication siya na going concern yung mismong business. So in other words, if hindi siya going concern, meaning yung company ay pagpa-bankrupt na. So, also, the going concern concept assumes that the business will have a long life and not close or be sold in the immediate future. So, companies that are expected to continue are said to be a going concern. So, that's going concern principle. Next one is time period principle. So the FS or the financial statements are to be divided into specific time intervals. So examples in the Philippines, so Philippine companies are required to report financial statements annually. So let's say if you are a calendar year, so meron kasing calendar or fiscal year. So kapag calendar year, it is usually ending by December 31. So ang calendar year mo ay from January 1 to December 31. Pero kapag naman fiscal year, so other months or other days ending as long as same pa rin, 1 year, so 12 months. So let's say June 1 up to or July 1 up to June 30. So that's a fiscal year. So yun. So another example is the salary expenses from January to December 2015 should only be reported in 2015. So itong mga example na to ay under sa time period, meaning yung salary, expenses, or yung income for that certain period or for that certain calendar or fiscal year ay for that calendar and fiscal year lang. So, since expenses and income are nominal accounts or kino-closed siya every year, so, ibig sabihin, the following year, hindi na siya makikita or nakapasok na kasi siya dun sa equity. So, yun. But the main concept here is that the FS or the operating life of the business are divided into time periods. So, that's the main concept of the time period principle. Next one is the monetary unit principle. So it means the amounts are stated into a single monetary unit, or the business transactions can be objectively measured or quantified in terms of the monetary unit, or here in the Philippines, peso. So example is Jollibee should be reported or should report FS in pesos even if they have a store in the United States. So as long as the company or the Jollibee Corporation is here in the Philippines, so dapat kahit na meron siyang store sa US, so iba yon. So dapat yung reporting niya dito sa Philippines ay in pesos. And also here, IHOP, so should report FS in dollars even if they have a branch here in the Philippines. So since IHOP is a corporation in the United States, so dapat in dollars yung FS niya. Kahit na meron din siyang branch dito sa Philippines. So that's basically monetary unit principle. Objectivity Principle. Financial statements must be presented with supporting evidence. So here in accounting, hindi lang tayo basta-basta magre-record ng mga transactions, dapat lahat ay supported by evidence. So example is here. So when the customer paid Jollibee for their order, Jollibee should have a copy of the receipt to represent as evidence. So kapag kunyari, bumibili kayo sa Jollibee, 'di ba, sa counter, pagkabili nyo, bibigyan kayo ng resibo ng binili nyo. So, that's not only for you as a customer, but also for them to take note or para matrack yung mga sales nila for that day. So, ang magiging evidence ng sales nila ay yung receipt na yon. So, that's basically because of the objectivity principle. Another one is when a company incurred a transportation expense. A voucher should be prepared as evidence. So, pwede mo namang sabihin, for example, um, ginamit ko kasi itong pera na to for transportation. But where's the evidence? So, again, here in accounting, kailangan dapat lagi may supporting evidence. So, a voucher or any source document na pwedeng maging supporting evidence yung expense na na-incur, so pwede yun. And that's all because, again, of objectivity principle. Next is cost principle. So here, the accounts should be recorded initially at cost. Meaning, kung ano yung cost ng item, yun talaga yung i-record mo initially. So, example, when Jollibee buys a cash register, it should record the cash register at its price when they bought it. So, kunyari, kung ang halaga ng cash register nung binili nila ay 20,000, so, ire-record nila yon sa libro ng business ng 20,000. Hindi pwedeng 25, hindi pwedeng yung future value niya, but rather yung mismong cost niya initially or nung mismong binili. So, another one is when a company purchases a laptop, it should be recorded at the price it was purchased. So, again, if bumili ng laptop, kung magkano mismo yung laptop, initially, kung ano yung cost niya, yun mismo yung dapat na i-record. So, that's because of cost principle. Accrual accounting principle. So, the revenue should be recognized when earned regardless of collection, and expenses should be recognized when incurred regardless of payment. So, here, in this concept or principle, ibabaliwala natin kung kailan natin nakolekta yung pera or kung kailan natin ginastos yung pera. So, as long as we already earned the revenue or the income, income or revenue na natin agad siya sa libro natin. And if expense na natin siya or kailangan na natin talagang i-recognize yung expense kahit na hindi pa natin nababayaran, dapat expense na talaga natin yon. So, that concept is because pala of accrual accounting. So, example here, when a barber finishes performing his services, so ibig sabihin tapos na yung service or na-provide na niya yung service, he should record it as a revenue. So, ganun yon. Kung kailan mo na-perform yung service or kung kailan na-ibenta mo na yung product, kailangan mag-record ka na ng revenue or sales. It, hindi siya nakadepende kung kailan mo matatanggap yung pera. Okay? And then, when the barbershop receives an electricity bill, it should record it as an expense even if it is unpaid. So, usually kasi, di ba, makakatanggap tayo ng electricity bill. And then, nakalagay doon, for example, for the month of January. So, since that electricity bill is for the month of January, so, kailangan, no mismong January, since recognize na natin siya as expense natin for that month, kailangan expense na natin siya for that month. So, kahit na hindi pa natin siya nababayaran, kasi kunyari, ang due date naman niya is February 4 pa. So, once na binayaran mo yon, hindi ka palang dun magre-recognize ng expense. So, kung kailan talaga nangyari or kung kailan mo na-recognize yung expense na yon, dun mo dapat i-record yung expense. So, that's accrual accounting. Again, here in accrual accounting, so regardless siya nung cash payment or kung kailan mo na-receive yung cash. So, again, parang complete opposite siya nung cash basis. So, this is the accrual accounting principle. And ito yung concept na ginagamit natin sa accounting. Next one is matching principle. So, cost should be matched with the revenue generated. So, one example of this is when you provide tutorial services to a customer and when there is a transportation cost incurred related to that tutorial services. So, it should be recognized as an expense for that period. So, since the way how we earned our income or our revenue is through that tutorial services, and in order to provide that service is nakapag-incur tayo ng transportation cost, so tama lang na i-record natin yung expense na yun for that period. And of course, kung tatanungin nyo bakit natin ginagawa yun, so yung mga resulta kasi nitong business operations na to ay mas ma-measure natin na mas maayos if there's a proper matching of the income and expenses within a reporting period. So again, yung reporting period, it can be a calendar year or the fiscal year. Next is disclosure principle. So meaning that all relevant and material information should be reported. So example nga is parang ganun lang din, should report all relevant information. So meaning lahat ng importante dun sa business, like for example, nagkaroon ng merge with another business or bumili ng gantong amount of shares sa isang corporation. So, all of that na makakaapekto dun sa mismong business itself. So, kailangan i-report din natin yon. So, again, here in accounting, we just don't report the quantitative or yung mga kaya nating i-quantify, but also this material information na makakaapekto in the future dun sa financials nung business natin. Second to the last is the conservatism principle. So, it is also known as prudence. So, in case of doubt, assets and income should not be overstated, while liabilities and expenses should not be understated. So, meaning nito, kasi if sinobrahan natin yung assets and income natin, so nakakaganda kasi ng isang kumpanya or na isang business yung asset and income. So, kapag masyado natin siyang in-overstate, parang magkakaroon tayo ng false idea or false result of operation ng business natin. And if naman yung pangit din naman na ina-understate natin ng sobra yung liabilities and expenses natin. Kasi kapag ganun yung nangyari, for example, hindi natin nilagay talaga lahat yung liabilities natin. So, pwedeng maging thinking natin sa business natin na wala tayong utang, pwede tayong bumili pa ng ganito, ganyan. Pero yun pala, mas madami pala dapat yung utang natin, which is magiging mali siya in a way na pagpapatakbo ng mismong business. So, that's why it's very important to be prudent. So, again, in case of doubt, we should not overstate our assets and income or yung mga nakakaganda sa company natin, and hindi din naman dapat natin yung i-understate or hindi ipakita lahat. So parang tinatago, hindi dapat natin ginagawa yun sa mga utang at sa mga expenses natin sa business. And then the last one is Materiality Principle. So in case of assets that are immaterial to make a difference in the financial statements, the company should instead record it as an expense. So, ibig sabihin, dito kasi own basis mo if magiging material ba yung bagay na yon dun sa negosyo mo. So, material, pag walang makakaapekto sa decision making, ibig sabihin, or hindi makakaapekto sa kahit anong desisyon na gagawin mo dun sa business, ibig sabihin, immaterial siya. So, you can directly record it as an expense. But if meron siyang halaga or epekto dun sa pagdedesisyon mo, dun sa business mo, so dapat i-record mo siya as an asset. So, one example is, a school purchased an eraser with an estimated useful life of 3 years. So, ano ibig sabihin nun? Ibig sabihin, bumili ng eraser na ina-estimate nila na pwedeng magamit yon, yung eraser na yon for 3 years. So, since an eraser is immaterial or immaterial relative to assets, like magkano ba ang eraser? For example, makakabili ka ng blackboard eraser for 15 pesos. So, hindi mo na siya kailangang i-record pa as an asset since mas madali na i-record mo na siya as an expense. Kasi wala din naman siyang halaga sa pagdidesisyon mo for that 15 pesos. But let's say, for example, you bought a machine worth 200,000 pesos. So, since material siya, especially sa pag-operate ng business as well, since kunyari ginagamit mo yon for your operation, so mas maganda na i-record mo siya as an asset kasi material siya dun sa mismong business. So that's materiality principle. So again, we have the business entity principle, the going concern principle, the time period principle, the monetary unit principle, the objectivity principle, the cost principle, the accrual accounting principle, the matching principle, the disclosure principle, the conservatism principle, and the materiality principle. So, if you're going to ask me, para saan to uli? Para saan to mga concept na to? Para saan to mga principle na to? So, again, ito yung guidelines and standards natin kung paano tayo mag-prepare ng financial statements. So, paano nga ba tayo mag-prepare nun? So, we will start first with the analysis of the transactions, then in the journalization. So, from the start up to the end, ito yung i-apply natin na concept and principle. That's why it's very important that ma-instill talaga sa inyo itong mga principles and concepts na ito. So, before we end our discussion, let's answer exercise number 2. So, para malaman natin if natutunan ba talaga natin yung mga accounting principles or accounting concepts. So, number 1, all relevant information should be included in the financial reports. So, aling principle ito? So, dapat daw lahat ng relevant information ay ilalagay natin dun sa financial statements or dun sa financial reports natin. Any guess? Okay, so that's letter G, disclosure principle. Okay, number 2, in case of doubt, assets and income should not be overstated. So again, that's being prudent. So when we say prudent, Ano yung term? So that's conservatism principle. Next, number 3. Assume that the company will continue indefinitely. So when we hear the word indefinitely, so that's going concern principle. Okay, number 4. All transactions should be supported by unbiased evidence. So, alin dito yung principle na dapat lahat ng transaction natin ay meron tayong evidence or supporting evidence. So, that's Objectivity Principle, letter B. Okay, so next is number 5. Expenses should be recorded in the period when the revenue is generated. So, dapat, kung kailan mo na-generate yung revenue, so dapat dun mo din ibabangga yung expenses. So, what's that? So, that's matching principle. Letter C. Next, number 6. Minimal cost incurred should be recorded as an expense. So, this type of minimal cost ay yung mga immaterial. So, ano yung concept na to? That's Materiality Principle, letter D. Next, a Philippine company should report financial statements in pesos. So, kapag Philippine company, dapat in Philippine peso. So, ano to? Ito ay letter H, Monetary Unit Principle. Next, number 8. A barber who performs services for a client should record revenue. So, what type of principle is this? So, this is letter I, Accrual Accounting Principle. So, again, if na-perform na yung service, dapat magre-record natin tayo ng revenue. So, ibig sabihin, kapalit ng service ay yung revenue na kikitain natin. So, irregardless again of the cash received. So, that's accrual. Next is number 9. Statement of financial position should be recorded as of December 31, 2020. Okay, so that's letter E, time period principle. And then number 10, a company that purchases furniture should record it at its acquisition price. So, yung mismong presyo niya nung binili mo yon. So, that's letter F, cost principle. So again, that's chapter 4, accounting concepts and accounting principle. Our next topic will be chapter 5, the accounting equation. Thank you for listening, class. Have a nice day.